Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Frame. This is a podcast where we talk about movies. I'm Eric.
And I'm Riley.
And this week we are talking about Skinamarink, the viral hit. Or I guess maybe that's a relative term, but it seems like it's fairly popular online.
It's certainly viral, at least within the horror community. What more is there to say about? I mean,
yeah. Is it viral in the same way that Paranormal Activity was viral before virality was a thing? Like, do you remember those ads?
I do.
Crazy.
I do. I almost feel like this isn't quite as viral as Paranormal Activity.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Paranormal Activity being absolutely huge. Massive.
Yeah, or Blair Witch even is another example of that.
But for a shoestring budget, as well as this movie has done, it's without a doubt viral, and it's huge. Like it's a movie that I didn't expect so many people to be talking about, but on huge channels, whether that's the film critics and commentators that I follow. IGN did a review on it. Like, I didn't expect IGN to, and they interviewed the director, Kyle Edward Ball. They interviewed him. They reviewed the movie. He went to Los Angeles and had an interview with Patton Oswalt. I'm sure he's done many other circuits and interviews. It's certainly a big sensation.
Yeah, it's really cool to see such a small movie doing well. And did you know about Kyle Edward Ball before this? Like, do we know what he's done other than that short film that he put up on YouTube as a proof of concept?
No, I don't know his other work. And I'm also really not familiar with his YouTube channel. I know what he did, and he talked a little bit about this because, as you know, but other people might know, I actually attended the premiere for the movie.
Look at this guy over here.
Right?
Fancy.
It makes you feel a little nice.
This is all legitimized now by you going to this premiere.
But I'm pretty sure he talked about his origins and how this movie kind of came to be a little bit during the Q&A session. And he had a YouTube channel, and apparently I think the YouTube channel was relatively successful. And the gist of it was, tell me your nightmares, tell me your fears, I'll make a video about it. And I think that also led to his short film Heck, I think it's called.
Yes, that's the movie that was or short film that was the proof of concept for Skinamarink. Yeah.
But I haven't seen anything else. This is the only thing I've seen of him. I haven't gone back and looked at any of his previous YouTube videos, but interesting movie. You may not like the movie, but it's interesting.
Hey, I like this guy. He said that his big inspirations for Skinamarink was Black Christmas, the original Black Christmas.
Did he?
Yeah, it was, there's a quote that I found, and I can read it out later, but basically he said that, he liked Black Christmas because of those like ambient shots of the house that there's like those like long panning shots, and he said there is one shot in Skinamarink that he said is his Black Christmas shot, and it was when I read that I was like, this is great. Like I can really respect that deep cut from the horror genre.
That's actually interesting though, because I remember during our conversation about Black Christmas, that was something I complimented about Black Christmas. I think you agreed was it did a really good job at setting the stage and giving you a feel of the layout for the house. And that really helped contextualize what is a relatively small story. But I didn't know about Black Christmas. I heard him reference other things and even video games on his interview with IGN. He talked about like Silent Hill 2 being one of the inspirations for this movie.
Okay.
I forget the whole gist of the interview, but there's definitely influences, and it seems like he has been ingrained in not only film horror, but if we're to take the IGN interview into account, also video game horror too. I think it's just a genre he likes, and it's nice that he got to play within it and that he created a very successful movie out of it.
it's cool that he seemingly got his start on YouTube, because I think that this movie has a lot of elements of like creepypasta, kind of like online horror stories. And I'm wondering if that's why it's really popular, because that is just part of the culture of horror now, like creepypastas and weird horror ARGs and projects done by people who like don't necessarily make horror movies, but they create like horror stories and worlds and kind of multimedia projects. So that's awesome. I can 100% respect the game of that.
This being a creepypasta type story completely fits the bill. And just for those who have no idea what Skinamarink is, because let's just be honest, the name Skinamarink gives you nothing. It's a very random, out of the blue title for a movie that really has nothing to do with it other than the song association, Skinamarink, being kind of like a childhood song or something you associate as not a nursery rhyme, but something akin to that. And there's moments where there's a lot of retro sound bites and retro songs playing throughout this movie. That's the closest I can come to any connection. It's really just a random name. And in fact, during the Q&A, someone asked, like, what does Skinamarink mean? And he more or less said, nothing. I thought it sounded interesting. It was a talking point. It was a very blunt answer. But for those who haven't seen the movie, premise is very simple. There's not a big plot to the movie, and
not really. No,
really, it's two children. They're living inside a house. There's bumps in the night. There's noise in the night. Things are a little bit weird, and they wake up to find their dad isn't in the house anymore. Yep. And the doors and windows in the house seem to have disappeared, and it's just them in this spooky, dark, claustrophobic space with something, and that's something we don't really know what it is.
It's the story can be boiled down to these kids trying to figure out what's going on, and it's not explained to you. It's not really explained to them.
Yes.
And I think that is why this movie is so polarizing. I have to say that is the one thing. It just doesn't have a plot. It doesn't really have a story. It's very light, I guess, if you want to go that far, but it's almost non-existent to me. Did you think that it was just enough plot, or do you think it could have used a bit more?
To be honest, my complaint with this movie isn't about the plot. I think the plot and the lack thereof wasn't a make or break for me. For a film like this, really what I'm looking for is the ambiance and how it makes me feel. And this movie certainly made me feel things, some positive, some negative. But I think the overall premise is enough. The premise is...
it gets you there.
It's two kids alone in a house with something otherworldly, whether that's a demon, whether that's some ethereal entity. Who really cares?
Aliens.
Something is in the house with them, and that something seemingly has the ability or the power to manipulate time, to manipulate spaces. It's almost like it just manipulates reality around you. And I think that as a concept is interesting enough. It is the execution of the concept that is a little bit more challenging for me. I think... No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, you say the execution was maybe missed the mark for you. Is that like mechanical execution of like the shots or the lighting, or is it like the pacing of it?
Both. I think it's a little bit of everything. And I think it's important to set the stage by saying these are going to be criticisms for a feature film that was made on less than $15,000. And it's also worth noting that upon speaking with people involved in the film, it really wasn't even a $15,000 film because within that $15,000 budget was actually equipment that they borrowed. So like they didn't actually spend money. So like I forget everything they borrowed, but say like a camera got borrowed for the shoot. The value of that camera was then added to the
000 budget.
So they didn't truly spend $15,000 on the film. It was much less than that, and there was a lot of assistance in terms of organizing equipment and some of the other stuff. So when we're talking about
that is good to keep in mind.
It's
quite impressive on the budget,
right? Yeah. So my biggest complaint, and this is going to be a little bit aggressive, is this movie feels like it is a slideshow with a very good ambient background. Or a lot of ambient background noise. I thought the sound effects were really well done.
The sound design is really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
But especially like getting through that first 30 minutes for me was it was a test of endurance almost. And after that, I feel like it picked up
it clips
a good
along
amount
towards the end.
Yes.
Yeah. Because things actually start happening towards the end. It's interesting that you say that it is an endurance test for you, because like for me, it was a bit of an endurance test because and I will say that first 30 minutes was actually kind of scary for me. Okay. I think for me, it was a test because like I was just very unsettled by a lot, like among many things. The shot composition was really, really weird. Mm-hmm. It's not typical. No. The use of the muffled voices.
Yes.
I think that was really weird for me, but I will say it was an endurance test for me because it made me feel uncomfortable. Yes. And it didn't really make me feel scared. There were moments that were scary for sure, but yeah, for me, it was a bit of a slog getting used to it. But once I was kind of used to it and desensitized to it, I bought into the style.
Okay.
But it definitely took me a while to get into it.
For those who haven't seen it, and especially if you haven't seen any of the trailers, the experimental premise for this film is you never actually see the subjects fully. Yeah. The shots are in terms of any characters, you're really getting below their knees. You see their feet walking around. You kind of get a sense where they're moving, but you don't actually see them. And in terms of setting,
movements implied.
Yes. Yeah. And in terms of setting the stage of the house and how the actual house is captured, it's a lot of shots of empty doorways, stairs, shots tilted upwards towards the roof.
Corners of rooms.
Yes. Yeah. You don't actually even get full shots of rooms. You're just getting snippets. And the story comes from... really, the story is being told in your imagination to a degree, and how you're filling in those empty spaces and the audio cues that you're getting from the film. You don't actually see things happen for most of the film.
A lot of it is implied. You know, somebody moves through a room by turning lights on. You know that they're in one position because they've turned the light on, and you see the light on the roof. Interesting way of maybe framing the space of the house, but for me, it was very claustrophobic. I don't know if you felt that way.
And I think that's probably what was intended.
Probably the point. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was where a lot of the discomfort for me came in. Yeah. It's such a weird movie. Like, it truly is experimental. Truly is.
It is for me, and I've talked with my partner about this and a few other people who've seen the movie. As I mentioned before, it's really the first 20 to 30 minutes where you're getting used to the style, and also at that point, the premise hasn't been fully established. There's a lot of exposition going into the film. For me, the turning point was when the daughter in the film goes up to the parents' bedroom, and first her dad's there, and then she sees her mom, and that was a genuinely terrifying scene.
That was pretty creepy. Yeah.
And after that, it switched a little bit to me, and I got much more engaged with the premise. the entity, the demon, whatever you want to call it in the movie, starts becoming a little bit more active. He starts interacting with the children. More spooky things start happening. That's when I got more interested. And then I think maybe the end possibly went on for a little too long.
A little bit too long. Yeah.
I feel like this is an hour 40 film that could have been an hour 10 even. I feel like there's a lot of things that could have been cut. You make it a tighter package, and I think it would have been a much stronger film.
Yeah. If you were to graph the tension of this movie, it would be a very typical horror movie. It would be like any other horror movie, but it does lose a bit of tension towards the end, I will say. And before we get into spoilers, like, I don't know if I can recommend this to everybody. What about you?
No. I feel like you really need to be a fan of just the horror community and supporting smaller horror projects.
Yeah.
If you don't like horror, well, don't watch this.
Well, yeah, that's a given.
If you only like the big IP horrors, you probably won't be interested in this. And if you don't like experimental films, this is probably the most experiment. This is the most experimental film I think I've probably ever seen, and that's simply because you really never see what's happening. It's something I've never experienced before, and it's kudos to making a film like this and trying it. But it's a hard recommend for 99% of people.
Yeah, I think that the commitment to this style is very commendable, and I think that more filmmakers should take risks like this. But at the end of the day, it does not always make a palatable product, and this is, in a lot of ways, not very palatable. So I like agree. I think that if you haven't seen this movie, and it even vaguely interests you in terms of the aesthetics or maybe the mystery or the hype around it, even if you are in those circles and you're exposed to it, like definitely consider checking it out, because it is important to support these things. Yeah. Just don't be surprised if you don't love the whole thing. It is a kind of a difficult movie to just wholly love. That's all I'll say about it before we get into spoilers.
And I also don't know if I'm conveying this totally clearly. I don't mind how it's shot, and I don't mind the experimental aspects. I just think there's too many downturns in terms of the pacing of the moment. Yeah. If it was a shorter movie, I feel like the fact that you're looking at empty doorways, empty corners of the room, you're never seeing the subjects, everything's implied. I think that could work really well. It just needs to be a bit brisker of a pace in terms of progression of the plots, hitting some of those scary moments. Yeah. Yes. We just need to get to the destination a little bit quicker.
Yeah, it very much is irreverent, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word, but it very much revels in the weirdness of houses in the dark, the spaces that you occupy, like how they themselves can be scary. I do think that comes across. You're totally right. As a film, it just doesn't work.
Not as a feature-length film.
Not as a feature-length film, because 100% this could be condensed into like a 45-minute to an hour. You said an hour 10. I think that's totally reasonable. You would get to all the scary parts because there are some genuinely terrifying moments in this, but you have to sit through like 20 to 30 minutes of black rooms,
Okay, let me put it this way. Or let me ask you a question. So the start of the movie is you're introduced to these kids. The father is still in the house. At one point, either the son falls down the stairs, or I think it's more so implied that maybe this entity had a hand in pushing him down the stairs. I don't know. Yeah. He falls down the stairs, and the father drives him to the hospital. And it's kind of after they come back to the hospital and during this subsequent time period that the father disappears, the doors and the windows go away. But to get to the point where the kids wake up and they realize their father is gone, the house is really weird now. I'm gonna guess that was 30 minutes.
It is about 30 minutes. Yeah.
If you chopped that introductory 30 minutes and you start the movie with the kids waking up and realizing no one is there, would that have changed anything for you?
Yeah.
Would you have missed anything?
I don't think I'd miss anything because everything that first 30 minutes serves, it just doesn't really come up again. It doesn't really matter. Like, I've seen theories online about how Kevin is his name, or what is the main character? Do we get his name? Does he have a name?
I thought it was Kevin.
Is it Kevin? Yeah. Kevin, and then his sister Kaylee.
Yes, Kaylee. Yeah.
I have seen theories about how this whole thing is taking place inside Kevin's head and he's in a coma, which, cool idea. It touches on themes of forgetting people and the house is seemingly deteriorating, like maybe his mind is, whatever. That is all really cool. It doesn't matter. That theory doesn't matter. And I think by extension, that first 30 minutes doesn't affect anything after. And I think the mystery would be better served by them just getting to the point. Their parents have disappeared. You could imply that very easily. And then just get on with the scary stuff. I really think it could work, but the fact that it's there, it doesn't, well, no, I was going to say it doesn't really take away from the whole movie, but it kind of does because you have to get through that to get to everything else. So yeah. What about you? Do you think, would you have missed it?
I don't think so. I think you could have chopped it off and it would have been as spooky. You wake up.
I think so.
Nobody's there. I think that in itself, I probably had nightmares about that as a kid.
This is a literal nightmare. This is absolutely a nightmare I have had. And maybe that's why it resonates with people so much. But a nightmare doesn't necessarily have backstory to it. It doesn't necessarily have any exposition or setup. So maybe that would have been a better choice. But
see, that's interesting. That I haven't actually heard that theory where
the coma theory.
It makes sense because he fell down the stairs, and at that point you hear of the dad. The one theory that I watched was call it a demon, but the demon abducts the two children and he has control over space and time, more or less, because throughout the movie there's moments where things are fast forwarding and rewinding, especially as you get to the latter 2/3 of the movie. Kevin seemingly starts just mysteriously going room to room. Like, he's not actually walking there, but he just
appears.
Yes. He's almost being shifted around the house. And there was a couple other reasons for it. But once again, to your point, it doesn't really matter. You're just theory crafting because the movie doesn't tell you. And obviously theory crafting, that's something I have fun with. And I like looking at reviews.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes. But
does it add to the nuts and bolts of the story though and of the movie? No. Not really. It doesn't, but the leaving things open to interpretation, always a good thing in my mind.
Yes.
I think when used well, it's a super powerful storytelling tool, but in this case, it almost couldn't make a choice to not tell or to tell. And it kind of rides the line in between.
Yes.
I didn't really love that.
If you want to hear something that's kind of funny, apparently during the editing down of the film, one of my friends who was kind of involved in that process, or at least watched some of the early cuts, there was like a 3-hour cut originally. I don't know if the 3-hour. I don't think the 3-hour cut was ever going to be the one that was actually released. Sure. But he watched.
Hours? Oh my god, that's too much. That would break my brain watching 3 hours of this.
But
good director's cut, I guess.
I don't know enough about the filmmaking process as a whole, but it's not that surprising because when we talked about Avatar, James Cameron's whole thing for Avatar 3 is he wants to, if this is true, he wants to render all the CGI and have it like a fully visualized cut of the movie and that cut's supposed to be like 9 hours, and then he's gonna edit it down from there. Could you
James
imagine?
Cameron, though? I don't
True.
know. Like, in some ways, that kind of makes sense because
Yes.
it's such a high scale or big scale movie. Not to
Yes.
say that Skinamarink doesn't deserve the same sort of lens applied to it, but I don't know. It's just like the concept is so small that like 3 hours, and maybe it would have been better. Will I watch the 3-hour cut? Probably not.
Yeah.
If it ever comes out on Blu-ray, but. Yeah, that's a really cool fact, though. I will say the fact that there could be more out there, like more of this, like really weird imagery and like all these weird shots. Like I'm morbidly curious to see it. But I have to ask you this because, like, I was asking myself this the entire time I was watching it. Were you scared by this movie? Was this a scary movie to you?
I wasn't scared. No. Attention, yes.
Yeah,
I would.
it's a very
I would
tense
say,
movie.
even your earlier use of the word discomfort, I think, is also accurate here. I felt tension and discomfort because two things I think this movie does phenomenally is the use of lighting and shadows and the audio in the movie. But turning specifically to the shadows in the film, it does such a good job at almost every shot, maybe half of the room or half of what you're looking at, or maybe 3/4 of what you're looking at is bright enough that you can see, but it's not bright. But then there's always these shadows. And sometimes, and I don't know if you caught this at all too, but sometimes I felt like I could see movement in those shadows.
Yeah.
And you're waiting for something to poke its head out. You're waiting for
Something
a loud
to move.
noise, something to jump. You're feeling that tension. And it's the exact same thing that Paranormal Activity did. Because if you remember watching Paranormal Activity, at the start of the movie, it would be a camera in the corner of the room looking at the bed, and nothing would happen for a few minutes. But then like night 3, the bed sheet gets tugged a little bit. And then as you go, things start happening a little bit more frequently and they're a little bit more dramatic. But just those small movements and anticipating those small movements was enough to build that tension. And I think this movie hit that part out of the park.
Absolutely. I don't think there is any movie out there that I've ever watched that has inspired the feeling of dread in me. And dread, I had to look it up because like I was like, is dread the right like word for it? And dread by definition is the anticipation of fear. It's like what leads up to fear.
Okay.
And being scared. And this one 100% is it's dreadful. Like the entire movie is leading you by the hand towards something. You don't know exactly what it is, but the movie is pushing you towards it. And there's a point, and the point where that got really scary for me, and you know, the point where I was like, no, I don't want to see what this movie's going to show me, is when the entity says, "Look under the bed."
Oh my God.
It's so good because you don't hear anything. And then that's all you hear. And it really like tapped into this like primal fear of like, you know that something is going to be there and you're like looking for it, but you can't exactly see it. And it's like kind of clawing at the edges of the frame and you can't stop looking. And it is mesmerizing in a way. I don't know if you felt the same way about some of those scary elements.
In terms of that scene in particular, I honestly think I held my breath.
Yeah, yes, 100%.
Yes.
I had my headphones on and I was watching it downstairs in the complete dark because I was like, this seems to be the way that I should be viewing it. And like thinking about that moment is like making my spine chill. Like I'm getting chills. Like it is very impactful in that way. It's just too bad that there's a lot around it that's not super impactful.
But the one thing I love about that scene too is it subverts your expectations a little bit, because when Kaylee, and it's the daughter at this point doing it, when she looks under the bed, I think you're taught to think that something is probably going to happen under the bed. Something's going to jump out. Maybe
Sure.
that's the face of whatever entity there is. You're going to see something that's going to spook you, and nothing is there.
There's nothing.
Or nothing that you see.
As far as like the visual information goes of the
Yes.
shot, no, there's nothing there.
And it
Yeah.
was such a creepy scene because at that point, the mother appears across the bed when she comes back up,
Yeah.
and you just know these aren't her parents. It's not her mother. They're acting strange. She knows that. It's a very tense scene, and there's a couple other scenes in the movie like that as well. But honestly, that was probably one of the most memorable horror scenes that I've seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah, I would put it up there for in my recent memory with that scene in Black Christmas with the shot of the eye through the door
Yes.
slit after what's her face gets murdered.
Yeah.
It's chilling.
I think this is
really
an iconic scene.
It is, yeah, 100%. I like that you point out the subversion of expectations because my dumb brain thought there's definitely going to be something there, but of course there isn't, because that is the idea of the entire movie. It's what goes bump in the night. It's what do you sense but you never see,
Yes.
And that is pervasive through the entire movie. Are there any other memorable scares that you want to talk about? Any other memorable like scenes?
I don't think there is any scene that built up dread, because I think that's an excellent word, quite like that one. But there were some terrifying scenes that plays on your imagination, pardon me, in such a horrific way. Like when soon after this is when Kaylee, the daughter, disappears. We're told that she didn't listen to whoever or whatever's in the house.
Yep.
You see that her mouth is gone, her eyes are gone. That was a terrifying image.
That was good, yeah.
But after that, when Kevin, the son, is all alone, I thought that alone was terrifying. But then eventually, kind of building towards the climax of the film, this entity asks him to stab his eye. And that was horrifying because he did it.
Yeah.
And then later, towards the end of the movie, he's having this conversation with some emergency responder, presumably like 911 or whatever the equivalent might be, wherever this movie takes place. And he did cut his eye. He told the responder
operator,
that yes. And I thought that was horrifying, just because about there's a, generally speaking, I'm not bothered by horror, and I'm not bothered by gore or violence in horror. You could take like Saw, for instance. Doesn't faze me at all. But when you take a movie like, recently I watched Martyrs, which I know you haven't seen, but there's a lot of self-mutilation violence in that.
Okay, yeah.
And self-mutilation violence freaks me out so much. Whenever a character is doing harm to themselves,
That it just gets
bothers me. And obviously it doesn't show Kevin do anything, but once again, my imagination filling in the blanks that are purposely left there, it horrified me.
Yeah, it's kind of scary because you it's really just that it's as scary as you can imagine it. Yeah. Do you think that it being about two children, do you think that like ratchets up the stakes for you with this scene in particular?
Yes, and I also think it ratchets up the tension in the movie as a whole, because I recall when I watched this movie, especially after Kaylee disappears, at one point Kevin basically goes into the basement and sits in front of the TV, and he's just like, I'm going to stay here because it's safe.
Yeah.
Once again, I feel like that's something that I did as a kid.
I would have done that. Yeah, 100%.
It was that. I mean, actually, I could tell a story that's pretty relatable to this.
Oh, is this a real life story?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't have to deal with a haunted house. Actually, it does have to deal with a haunted house, I suppose.
Oh, wow. You were Skinamarink.
Yeah,
as a kid.
not actually, but at one point, me and my sister, we went to a haunted house, and I would have been very, very young. And at one point, I couldn't take it anymore. I was terrified. So in my mind, I'm like, if I move forward, I'm going to get scared. If I move backwards, I'm going to be scared. So I sat down and I stopped moving.
Wow, I love the logic.
And that's what Kevin did at some point. He basically went to the basement. He's like, I'm going to sit here until my dad shows up, until something happens.
And
this nightmare stops. And I'm like, kudos, kid. That's good logic.
Yeah, you kind of see yourself in these kids, because like there are a few things, and this is I was gonna say like kudos to these two actors, these two kids, for putting on really good performances. Now that's helped because like you don't see their faces. It's really everything is implied, so that really helps. But they do some things in this movie, like, you know, the first thing they do is they go set up in the living room because they don't want to be upstairs. You know, they turn on the TV because that's comforting. They put a couch in front of the hallway where they hear the voice coming from because it's scary, but like that's not going to do anything. But I think in general, like it's really endearing to see these kids like try and puzzle their way through this. And for me, that really adds to my fear for them. You know, the tension. And it doesn't pull its punches with its kids like some movies where it's like implied that a kid would never die. Do you know what I mean? Like kids don't get hurt in movies. And I can't take credit for that exact idea. Ryan Hollinger, in his essay on Skinamarink, he talks about that. But I do think it's worth mentioning because it's a very specific choice to cast two kids in this movie. It wouldn't have been as compelling if it was like an adult trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
No, and I mean, even in the examples that I used during this podcast so far, those were all experiences either that I actually had or I imagined happening as a kid. This movie plays on nostalgia and the things you used to fear. Right now, if there was a dark house and I was all alone, I mean, granted, I'm in an apartment, so I always have that safety. Maybe if I lived in an acreage in the middle of nowhere, maybe an empty house would still freak me out a little bit. But I don't have those same fears now. Whereas as a kid, you do. And you make a good point where they do puzzle through it a little bit. And they're like, okay, well, obviously we can't escape this place. There's no doors. Everything is freaking us out. There's someone talking to us. We don't know what's happening. Let's just kind of like barricade ourselves here.
Yeah, it kind of contributes to this like this other like feeling of maybe melancholy. It's kind of sad. Okay. It to me, I think like the thought of obviously being trapped in a house is scary, but you know, not being able to communicate with your parents, even though they're seemingly in the room, like in the house with you, and nothing is making sense, like that would be. I am sad for them. I guess maybe the movie is not trying to be sad, but I very much empathize with them, and it comes off as like very sad because like what the hell happens?
What were your thoughts on the sound mixing for the film? Did you like it?
I like the sound design, 100%. Mixing was I don't know if I can comment on it because I wore headphones.
Okay.
And everything seemed fine to me. Like I assumed that when I couldn't really hear or understand somebody speaking, it was because it was intentionally not meant to be understood. Like when Kevin's dad is on the phone, I don't think there are subtitles.
No.
The important stuff seemingly has, subtitles.
Yeah.
But there were parts that maybe could have been a little bit better, but I think that was like part of the style. What was it like in the theaters?
Well, I assume this was the same for you. Parts of the movie for you were subtitled, right?
Part of them, yeah.
Okay. So same thing for the movie. I wished all of it was probably subtitled, and I get that where some of the audio was a little bit more muffled, especially when it was this demon or entity talking. Yeah. It's supposed to, you're not fully supposed to understand. It's supposed to, I don't know, frustrate you maybe. That might not be the right word.
Upset you. like kind of off kilter, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is a movie where so little happens and there's so little spoken moments. As a viewer, if something's being said, I think it's important enough to the plot that I kind of want to know what's being said.
Yeah. Why would you put the dialogue in if it wasn't meant to be understood?
And there's already so little dialogue of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get it from a creative and experimental standpoint, because obviously the important moments are subtitled.
Yeah.
But there's some moments of audio where it wasn't muffled. And I feel like even if I had headphones, I could probably make it out.
Yeah.
But I didn't have headphones and I didn't have that. So I'm just missing out context, which I feel like I should have had.
The headphones helped a lot. I think you recommended that I listen or watch it with headphones. Yeah. That was the right call, because now some of the dialogue really isn't important to the plot. Like I do think that they did a good job of like subtitling what's relevant, but you make a good point that like it should be understood by everybody, regardless of if it's important to the plot or not. If it's in the movie, it needs to be like conveyed to the audience, and some of it is not.
Did the use of old cartoons freak you out?
Not really. I think that there are aspects of the cartoons that freaked me out. I think that what freaked me out more was the constant noise that it was making.
Okay.
It's kind of weird to explain, but so basically the TV is set up in the living room, and because of the way that the light and shadow is sort of captured by the camera, it is like super unnatural. The light is from the TV is super unnatural, and you kind of always have the TV going in the background. Like even when they're not necessarily in the room, the kids aren't necessarily in the room, the TV is going. And to me, that was like really unsettling. It would be like walking into your living room and the TV is on. You don't remember it being on, but it's like on static, or it's, playing something random. That's a weird kind of take on it. I can concede that. But for me, it wasn't necessarily the cartoons itself. It was that it was omnipresent almost. Like you could tell me that the demon was the TV and I would think, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense, because it's almost always present in some form. But what about you? Was that like a scary thing for you?
Discomforting. And the reason I don't know if this is a proper connection I have, but it reminds me of Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Having those old cartoony sounds, I associate it with that song, or at least how that song makes me feel. Yeah. And it sets me off a little bit.
Yeah. Huh. And is it like, do you think that stems from, like just the way that the sound was conveyed through the movie? Because it was kind of distorted. You could kind of hear it, but it was almost always just a little inaudible. Do you think that
so.
Helped? Yeah.
To be honest, I couldn't tell you. It's just like this weird emotional feeling I have. Yeah. And I don't know if that was intended, because, well, obviously one of the reasons why the older cartoons were used is because you didn't have to license that.
Copyright.
Those were things that he was able just to use. And but I don't know if there was any side motivation, because for whatever reason, it adds to the discomfort. I don't know if that's something he shared. But for me, it did add to things. And also your point too, where the TV is always going and it casts like this whitish blue light, which is also a little bit off-putting. It was an interesting choice to have the old cartoons in it. I actually liked it. I thought that was one of the more interesting points.
It fits the whole aesthetic of the movie, because for those who haven't seen it, it takes place in 1995 or 1994. I think.
Yes, yeah, it is
mid 90s, and like I was born in 94, so this kind of slots exactly into where I think my brain would go with
Yeah.
nostalgia, you know, like it, even though it's like old cartoons, it's like there were Lego bricks and there's that fucking phone, the phone with the eyes. Like, I will say that scene, that is like one shot that is super memorable to me. Is it's dark, the whole frame is dark, but all you can see are the eyes of this phone and like the outline of its face.
Yes.
And that is probably going to be burned into my mind forever. It is so uncanny, so unsettling. What did you think of the use of these like objects that we know and are potentially nostalgic for, like, you know, the building blocks and the cars and all that kind of stuff? Do you think, like, for you, did that add anything to the movie for you?
I think it just added to your connection with your childhood again. Because like you mentioned, for us watching it, this took place when we were kids.
Yeah.
Like
Pretty young,
yes. But we're familiar with all these things. It's visual tools to help take our minds back to what it was like for us as kids. It's just, it associates you with those nostalgic memories. It associates you with those nostalgic fears that you had. I think it's just a tool to get you in the right mindset. And in terms of the phone, which had a very, very cheeky jump scare moment, that's just a creepy toy.
Yeah, I mean, it really gets you to, as an adult, examine these toys and think, why do they look this way?
Why does a phone need to have eyes?
Yeah, exactly. Like Fisher Price, like what the hell were you thinking giving these kids these? And I would have never thought of that as a kid, obviously. Yeah. But there's something deeply unsettling about like how the naivete of like a kid could contribute to something that eventually is very scary to you. Yeah, I think in that respect, like Skinamarink has such a clear vision for how it should look and feel.
Yes.
And that just brings me back to the plot. Like, it really could have had a bit more going on, unfortunately, or been truncated, like we said multiple times.
Yes. No, yeah. If I was to summarize it, I think I liked the plot more than you. I think the fact that it's largely void of a plot doesn't matter that much to me, because it's playing on the fear of the unknown, and having a plot that's relatively unknown, it kind of just adds to the concept of the film what it's meant to be. The problem that I have with it is it just goes on too long, and there's too many gaps between some of the highlights of the film, some of the scarier moments. We've already mentioned two scenes in particular, looking under the bed and the eye scene.
Yeah.
Those are, I truly believe, especially the looking under the bed, that will be an iconic horror scene. I think that is rightly a scene that people should be talking about when they talk about some of the great horror scenes in films. It goes right up there.
Yeah, it's in the pantheon for sure.
The problem with this film is it doesn't need to be a short film, but 45 minutes to an hour 10. You could easily cut off a lot of stuff, and I think it would have made the pace go a lot quicker. I think I would have been less bothered by the moments of downtime where you're looking at random shots of the house, but seemingly nothing's going on. There's only
a black screen.
Yeah, because unlike, say, the Black Christmas movie and how that movie uses shots of the house to set the stage of the film, when there's nothing going on in this film and you're just having a series of those shots, it doesn't help me understand the house better. It doesn't really help me understand where the characters are in the house. It's just filler shots. And that's kind of where I go back to my initial comment of a lot of this movie, especially the first 30 minutes, it's a slideshow with very, very excellent sound design. Yeah.
Yeah. And does it achieve anything? Not really, other than it be like setting the mood, because it doesn't really change anything about like how you perceive the house or like the locations of characters. It literally is just to say, hey, this is the house. isn't it really creepy when you turn on a light and there's a big black shadow in the corner of the room? Like, I mean, and I say that kind of pejoratively, but like, I really think that in some ways I can understand why the director probably thought it was necessary to have these establishing shots, because it's really about being a mood piece for sure. But I think we're both in agreement on it could be condensed a little bit.
What do you think the ending 572 days is about?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because for most of the movie, you are not given any sort of title cards or text other than the subtitles. But then suddenly the film decides, oh, we're going to tell you exactly how many days have passed. Or hours or minutes, I guess.
I don't know.
It could be. And people point to that in the coma theory that like that he's like keeping track of the days that he's been in his mind or trapped in his mind or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think it fits in with the rest of our thoughts on the pacing, that you could potentially cut that out and just end it with him talking to the entity, and just skip to that. Like, you could probably take out, because I think it goes, if I'm remembering it correctly, it's like it shows that title card of the 572 days or whatever, and then it cuts to him exploring the house, but he's like on
the roof.
Like he's on the roof.
Yes.
Yeah, which very cool and unsettling. But
that was unsettling.
And then the door opens and the room turns into like a black void, essentially. And then you start to see photos and and then there's that scene where the figure at the end of the bed disappears, right?
Yes.
Is that before or after? Is that in the last third?
I feel like it's after, but I'm not sure, because I do remember like the title card with the 572 days pops up, and then the movie seemingly goes on for a little bit longer after that.
Yeah. So like you could maybe get rid of some of that, and I don't know if it really serves anything beyond maybe implying some plot stuff. I don't know. What do you think?
See, I'm not even sure. I think it's like the title of the film being Skinamarink, not really actually having any association with the film. Like according to the Q&A, it was really just an interesting word. It was a talking point that sounded good. Yeah. Someone asked the director, Kyle, what was meant by 572 days. Yeah. And his response was, I don't know, using like 666 felt too on the nose, so I picked a random number. Like, I'm not even sure it has a meaning. I think it's really just another thing to make you question, is it significant, and to create a talking point. Yeah,
I mean, we're talking about it, so I mean, I think,
But rightly so, because it's a movie where so little is told to you and so little information is presented on the screen that when a title card with something like that is put forward to you, you think, okay, this is pretty significant. And it could be the coma theory where it's you're counting the days, or with the one theory I watched where the kids were basically abducted and taken to this netherworld by a demon. That's how long they were trapped there too. You could take either, but I do agree. You probably could have just kept it where you could have ended at some point near where he's speaking to the demon. I think the idea of Kevin being alone and his sister being dead, and he's just trapped with this figure for seemingly forever, or however long you want to imply from it, but him just being trapped alone in this house with this figure for eternity. I think that's terrifying enough. That would give me nightmares.
Yeah, it doesn't. It just seems kind of weird. So like, why? Yeah, in the absence of being told what it means, like, do you think that it's kind of disingenuous for the filmmaker to just put random things in to try and spark conversations? Like, I want to get your thoughts on that, because that seems like, if it doesn't mean anything, like, actually, maybe this is a better way to phrase it.
Okay.
Do the people making up the theories, like the coma thing or the being abducted by the demon or aliens or whatever, do you think like it's genuine for the filmmaker to put this in because he wants like the audience to have ownership over it and make their own decisions? Like, or do you think it's kind of stupid to put in if it doesn't, you know, go mesh with the plot or talk about the plot?
Is it necessary? Probably not, but
Yeah.
I do enjoy theory crafting and I enjoy listening to theories. Does it detract from the movie? No, because I think if you just watch the movie and you see that title screen pop up, you're just like,
You might not
okay.
think past it.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't take away from your experience at all, and then it leads to all these subsequent conversations of what is the importance of it, and I think that part is interesting. It really it's just the creators of the film creating a product and then throwing it back to you on how you want to interpret it. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Like, I think that's actually very admirable because we live in a world now where things are explained to you in movies, you know, big budget movies that need to get their point across and need to have wide appeal. You know, they tell you everything. They don't leave it up to you. So I think it's cool that there are filmmakers still, you know, doing that. But
I'm trying to think of some other good movies that have done that. And I feel like maybe we even did a podcast on one where the filmmaker left a lot to your imagination for you to interpret. For whatever reason, I'm drawing a blank, but I know there are films.
Was it? Oh God, what?
I feel like we talked about something like that before.
Well, it's kind of like Christopher Nolan's the ending of
like Inception.
Inception. Like that's big budget doing it in a way that doesn't really affect anything. It's just more of a cool ending. But I'm looking
was
at
it
now.
Was it the Empty Man that you have to? No, I don't think it was the Empty Man.
Was it the Green Knight? No. Was it no, it wasn't the Green Knight. Could have been the Empty Man.
I don't know. But regardless of whether we talked about it in the podcast or not,
I'm just realizing episode number 2 is missing from. I don't know why that's
for whatever
I'll have
reason.
To look into that. Anyways, continue.
But there's tons of movies that I've seen where something doesn't make sense, something's not explained, and I just go on. I'm not on Reddit, but basically I just go down the rabbit hole of what do people think it means, and I like talking about it.
Yeah, I think Skinamarink is kind of the perfect movie for that. It lends itself well to people crafting their own theories, and I'm going to be honest, there's probably some video essay that exists out there where somebody goes frame by frame and brightens up the frame and shows you exactly what is like there or not there. And it's kind of perfect for sharing clips of on TikTok, you know? So in that way, do we know how old, Kyle Edward Ball is? Is he like kind of our age? Like, is he younger? It's the generational thing is interesting to me because this is very much a movie made for, you know, late Gen Z to early, or like late Gen Z to late millennial, like that crossover.
I don't know how old he is, but I would imagine similar to our age, maybe a couple years older, but not totally. Not
like that really matters, but it just is interesting that he chose this setting and subject matter for his really debut film.
Well, is this going to be like another The Witch style movie? Obviously, it's not the same as The Witch, but I mean that in terms of, does this project generate enough interest for you that now you're going to be looking forward to what he does next and watch that?
100%. Yeah. He's now on my radar. I respect him as a filmmaker after this. Like, I truly think that, you know, maybe it'll be a flop. Maybe it'll be something super different. Maybe it'll be something in the same vein, but just a different setting or whatever. I think that this is one to watch. His next movie, in my opinion, will be probably the most important one for him because everybody's going to wonder, what is it going to be about after this? He's set up such a weird mystery around himself as a filmmaker. That interest in and of itself is enough to get people into the film from the creator of Skinamarink that will 100% be on the or on the in the promotional material for his next movie. So
Yes.
to answer your question though, 100%, I'm very interested to see what he does next. I can really only it's just like the movie. It is only as horrifying as I can imagine his next one to be. So yeah, what about you?
I completely agree with your comment that this next movie is probably going to be his most important, because I can only imagine now studios are seeing that this is a viral hit.
Yep.
He is a buzzword. Skinamarink is a buzzword. I imagine he's going to get a
Pretty big
decently
deal.
like a bigger budget. Like,
Yeah.
is he going to be doing a $100 million movie? Absolutely not. Or at least I can't imagine that.
Is it going to be
But
a James Wan style horror level movie? No, probably not.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he got, I don't know, a couple $1 million to make a film by some. There's tons of horror. God, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Like
Production companies.
like Blumhouse.
Yes,
Yeah.
I completely blanked there.
Yeah,
but there's
production
tons
house,
of horror production companies, either partnered with Shudder or something like Blumhouse, or take your pick. But there's
Monkey
enough.
Monkey Paw. That's Jordan
That's
Peele.
Jordan Peele's.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if those production companies and studios are like, okay, this guy, he's on a hot streak right now. Let's pick him up. Let's get him to do another movie, and let's give him a bigger budget. And I am very interested to see what he can do with a bigger budget.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what a bigger budget does to his movies. I'm also interested to see how his visual style or his vision for these, like for his movies, like I wonder if that can survive a big studio. Because, it's not just him who's the last call on things. Yeah. So I think that just adds to how important this next movie will be for him, because it could be, I don't want to say it's not, I don't want to say it's luck. I don't want to say it's just like a flash in the pan for him, but like it very well could turn into that depending on how this next movie goes for him.
Well, on that note, what are you going to give Skinamarink?
Okay. This is like a light 2.5 to 3 for me. Like, I think I could solidly put it in 3 for all of the things that I love about it. There's just a lot holding it back for me that I don't think I could go higher than a 3.
I think I'm a little bit more aggressive than you. I'm going to give it a 2.
A 2? Wow.
Did I like the movie as a whole? No. Do I love it as a proof of concept and that horror is still being reinvigorated, that you can still do on a small budget? Did I like a lot of aspects of the movie? Absolutely. I just don't think it came together as a feature film package.
I think that's a fair assessment, because like really we are, once you get into the feature length category, there is a whole other set of expectations that needs to be met. And yeah, I agree. This movie just doesn't make it. It's not irredeemable, but it's just really tough to watch in some ways.
That being said, if you want to support local filmmakers, small filmmakers, new projects, if you just have an interest in seeing things that you haven't seen before, whether that's good or bad, go give it a watch. Like, it's on Shudder.
Yep.
It's on video on demand now, and I think it's not that expensive. It might be like a $10 buy. It would be like a 99-cent rent probably. But regardless, if you have a Shudder subscription, give it a try if you want. Support these kind of projects because they don't come that often.
Yeah, it's
a talking point.
We gotta support them while we can. And you're right, it is a talking point. And could I see this being an inflection point for horror as a genre? Like, it might be. It is that out there. It is that different. It is that unique, I guess, for lack of a better word, that you could see there will be projects inspired by this movie 100% down the road. So you know, if you want to get a piece of that, you should definitely go check it out. And you can always just fast forward through the parts where it's a little slow.
Yeah.
Because I will say, to be cliche about it, sometimes the destination is like way more important than how you got there. And I know that's like not really a saying, but it's the opposite of the journey versus the destination, because the scares in this movie actually are very good. It is well thought out. It plays with your expectations of horror movies. So yeah, getting to those is worth it, I think, if you are a fan of horror movies. Coming from me, I've only recently become a fan of horror movies, and I think that it was 100% worth watching, in my opinion. But that's just us. That's just Beyond the Frame. Please let us know what you think in the comments below this video. You can leave a review as well on the podcast page. You could send us a message on Instagram if you don't agree with us. You know, this is a movie that's worth talking about, and it's worth having the discourse. So with all that being said, we have not picked a movie for next week, or did we?
Oh, I don't think we have. I don't think we settled on one.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll just like
maybe
cut
we'll just
it there.
Maybe we'll just leave it as it could be a surprise.
I think. Well, we should probably say what we're gonna watch next for posterity's sake. But maybe we should do Creed 3. Were you gonna go watch it anyways?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Boxing movie. My favorite genre of movie. It's like horror thriller boxing.
Specifically boxing, not like other sport movies, or
I mean, like, do I like other sports movies? Yeah. It's Ford versus Ferrari, excellent.
Yeah,
for
like
sure.
Miracle on Ice. Like,
I've never seen
Moneyball.
Miracle on Ice. Moneyball's excellent.
Moneyball's solid. Yeah.
But boxing movies in particular, love.
Okay, so we're next time we're gonna watch Creed 3. We've just decided. I have not seen any of them. So
wow.
Should I go and watch 1, 2, and before 3, or what's the deal with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so everybody else who hasn't seen it.
Well, watch it for the plot so you understand what's happening. Also watch it for the drama outside of the film, because you'll notice Sylvester Stallone is involved in 1 and 2, but not in 3.
Not 3. Why would that be? A mystery for next podcast. Maybe we can talk about.
I love it.
Its absence. I think it'll be good. I've heard really awesome things about Creed 3, and I had also heard good things about 1 and 2. I just never got around to seeing it. So that might be worth it. I could probably rent it. Or
I'll marathon it with you.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. I think that's a great way to set it up. But we have to end this now. So Riley, can you I went into this with a plan, but I don't think it will work.
If you're going to test me on like plugging the Patreon and stuff, I was going to be like, hell no, I don't know that.
I was going to say, we are Beyond the Frame. You can find us both on Instagram. We both have our own individual pages, but you can also go follow the podcast Instagram, where we post things like new episodes. We'll post clips, all that good stuff. If you want to support us, you can go over to our Patreon at BTF Pod. Every week I say we're going to like add some stuff to it. And I think we finally have some things that we can put onto the Patreon that are not just this episode, but you do get these episodes a bit early if you are a patron. You'll get the video version before everybody else, before it goes up on YouTube. And you can just support 2 small creators who just want to share their love about film, which I'm sure is just as satisfying as giving to any other cause.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the whole thing. This is Beyond the Frame. Riley, what's your the last thought that you have for Skinamarink?
Skinamarink, it triggers that feeling of no. Let me rephrase.
Okay.
I need to think about this.
I was hoping you just start reciting the childhood nursery rhyme.
Oh no! Just end it with Skinamarink dinky dink, Skinamarink doo. No, last thoughts on Skinamarink. It makes you fear what goes bump in the night, and if that interests you, give it a watch.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.